Good morning. I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to episode 1 of Dawn of the Artifacts 77. Ned sat in his GMC Bulldog step van, drumming his hands on the wheel, looking at the building across the street. 77 was a club that was as exclusive as it got in the Seattle Sprawl, but it sure didn't look like it. Almost directly across from him was a rather nondescript door with its address, 77, smartly next to it. On one side, there was a bar that clearly catered to the locals, and on the other side, there was a branch of Men's Common Denominator, a men's clothing store owned by Horizon. He got the call earlier today from Julius, and he and Julius went back a long time. Julius was there when Ned pulled him out of the gutter and decided to be more than just a ganger. It was Julius who noticed how good Ned was behind the wheel and first suggested the path that led Ned to become the smuggler he was. Julius sent a fair amount of work his way, but this one was just odd. The message replayed in his head. "Hey kid, I get a special request from a Miss Johnson. Seems like she needs a team to go on a trip with her overseas. Someplace tropical. If you're interested, she wants to meet tonight at a club called 77 in Renton at 5 in the evening. I'm sending the address and a code to broadcast when you get there, so they'll let you in. Apparently, this is a rush job, and she wants the best, so I'm contacting you and 3 others to meet there and head over." He didn't like it. A Johnson needing a team so quick for a long trip, and then to have them meet here at a fancy club. It stank. But, on the other hand, the Salish Council had tightened up its border control, and at the moment it was hard to make the long run from UCAS proper to Seattle running those sweet street drugs. And other jobs were also a bit scarce on the ground right now, especially if you didn't want to get involved in tempo. And he definitely didn't want to get involved in tempo. He needed the new yen, without a doubt. Punching his wheel, he finally decided and opened the door and headed across the street. His step was quick, not only to prevent him from changing his mind, but, true to form, Seattle was experiencing rain. Getting through the door was easy, as his comlink was broadcasting the right frequency, and he found himself in a small lobby-like area that felt tight and confining. 2 men in immaculate suits stood behind a counter, and one of them politely asked him, "Please leave any guns and any other weapons you may have with us. Also, please turn off any recording devices." Ned briefly looked from one placid face to the other, and reached into his coat and pulled out his Colt Manhunter and handed it over. His FNR was still in the van outside. One of the men deftly took the pistol and checked it in a space under the counter they were at. At that moment, a beautiful woman in a skin-tight cocktail dress approached the lobby and motioned to Ned. "Please, come with me. Your host is waiting." Ned followed behind, and as he stepped into the club proper, he was glad he dressed in what he thought was to the nines for this meeting. Everything appeared to be real wood and leather and plush chairs. The thing that struck him next as they continued down the pathway through the main room of the club was how quiet it was. The smell of cigar smoke and expensive rum quickly followed on the heels of the revelation about the lack of noise. The hostess led him through the main room and down a series of wood-paneled corridors lined with private rooms. Inside several, he saw glimpses of a few trid stars, a mafia don or two, and some high-ranking corporate officials. Finally, his guide stopped in front of a door to a small room and motioned at it. "Can I bring you any refreshments?" she asked in a sickly sweet tone. After a few minutes of thought, he said, "Sure. Some Teganel would be wonderful." She simply nodded and quietly left. As he entered the room, it was set up like an old-fashioned parlor out of a period trid. 2 small couches and several comfortable chairs were set along the edges of the room, with a dining table made of real hardwood with crystalware set at each place on top of a white linen tablecloth. Set in one wall of the room was an honest-to-God hearth with a real fire burning in it. Sitting very casually and comfortably in one of the chairs near the fire was a brown-haired woman with fair skin and blue eyes. A pale blue tailored suit and some unusual jewelry, including a large dragon-shaped ring, made up her outfit. She stood up as Ned entered the room and smiled, holding a glass of wine loosely in one hand. As she stood, it struck Ned that she was much taller than he would have expected, and also much thinner. Of course, she's an elf. The thought passed through his head, and that settled the matter. "Hello, I'm Miss Johnson. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. Please, sit down. You are the first to arrive. You must be Desert Taylor." Ned nodded as he looked away briefly to find a chair to sit in. "I am Desert Taylor." Julius must have given her his name. He was about as small time as it got. People he didn't already knew never matched his street name to his face. A minute or two after he sat down, a young orc walked into the room looking very out of place, but had a blazer and a nice shirt that mostly fit. Miss Johnson made her introductions and gave her thanks. Apparently, this guy was Bishop Gluttony. And not too long of a wait later, a human woman clearly chromed out walked in. Unlike Bishop, her clothing and demeanor weren't out of place. The chrome arms and cyber eyes were. Apparently, she went by the name of Fire Queen. The last to arrive was an elven male who managed to be almost as attractive as the hostess had been. He seemed to fit right in as he walked into the room. His street name was Crooked Aurora. Miss Johnson didn't sit back down after Crook Aurora entered. Instead, she motioned toward the table. "Now that everyone's here, let's eat." Sitting down, Ned went to put on his AR glasses when he noticed an old-fashioned printed menu unobtrusively sitting next to his place setting. Looking through the menu, he decided on a nice steak and mashed potatoes. No soy protein for him tonight, that was for sure. Dinner consisted of very little talking and mostly enjoying the nice meal. No one in the room particularly knew each other, and it showed. Miss Johnson evaded a few attempts to get her to talk about the job while they were eating. Finally, they finished, and a server cleared the last of the plates and refilled their drinks once again. And Miss Johnson jumped right into it without hesitation. "I trust that Julius mentioned I was looking for traveling companions? Yes? Well, actually, I'm in the business myself." She quickly smiles at this apparent revelation. "I've been hired by a private antiques collector who recently lost an item from his collection. His only clue is this man." She hands each of them a printed photo of a clearly elven man who has apparently been hired by a rival collector to find the item first. He's an elf who goes by the name of Samriel Lockwood. One or both of those names are likely to be false. We've been tracking him, but now it appears he's gone to Lagos. We need to find him quickly and trail him to the item. Normally, I work alone, but Lagos? Well, it's not exactly a safe place for a single woman. I'm sure you are all aware that the trail goes colder every hour, so I'd like to leave as soon as possible. Tomorrow morning, in point of fact. I'm willing to pay 2,000 new yen per person per day, plus a per diem of 250 new yen, with a guaranteed minimum of 5 days paid up front. If we find the lost item, and you assist me in recovering it, I'll split the finder's fee with you. That would work out to 50,000 new yen to split however you would like. Almost as soon as she finished talking, Crooked Aurora jumped in to haggle prices. Ned didn't really mind, because this elf was negotiating for all of them to be paid more, and that was something he didn't mind. After a few minutes of back and forth, Miss Johnson settled on 2,250 new yen per person per day. There wasn't much left to negotiate past that, and eventually all four of them agreed to do the job. Wonderful. Since we'll be traveling together, you can call me Jane, the elven woman said. Miss Johnson is something I'd call my employer. Before we leave, there are a few things you should probably know. She took out 4 data chips and gave one to each of the 4. I've put together a list of inoculations the World Health Organization recommends for travelers to West Africa. Some of the things aren't in your normal med kit, so you may need to see a doctor before we leave. There is some additional information about Lagos on the disc if you're not already familiar with the city. To get us to Africa, I've arranged for a private flight from here to Cairo, then on to Accra, the capital of Asante, and the closest real airport to Lagos. That way, we won't have to deal with any airport security or other travel issues. However, after that, I'm afraid we'll be traveling with a bush pilot into Lagos. I've been told there'll be limited room on the plane for us on that final leg, so pack light. A single carry-on bag and a backpack or duffel bag each is what I've been told. I'd seriously recommend everyone here bring a med kit. Anyone need any help arranging details before we go? Ned raised his hand. Yeah. Who do you suggest for a doc on such short notice? Bishop and the Queen nodded in agreement with Ned. Jane flashed a smile and then said, I know a good street doctor called Butch. His clinic isn't too far away. Several hours later, Ned plopped down on his bed with his AR glasses on. He slotted the data chip that Jane had given him and started perusing it. He was a bit careful moving his arms, though. Butch had to give him several shots in each arm. They were sore as shit. He opened a file called A Visitor's Guide to Lagos and started reading. Lagos is a feral city on the west coast of Africa. The city itself is home to 10 to 20 million people, most of whom live in conditions that would make the Redmond Barrens look luxurious. It was a long file, and mostly boring. One of the things he did pick up was that English, Yoruba, and French were good lingos for him to speak. He'd have to pick up a lingo soft for Yoruba and French. With those thoughts swirling in his mind, Ned drifted off to sleep. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Shadowrun. The next episode of this will be on December 7th. And make sure to tune in tomorrow for our end of the week video.